This is a perfect opportunity to bring up this next video. And I know, I feel like I'm just like literally posting shit over and over, but I want to watch this video with you guys. This is from Autumn Animations. It says, Unshackled from Addiction, a Personal Destiny Retrospective. Now, I do want to ask you guys, do you feel like you've been addicted to Destiny at some point? I faced game addiction, and I actually thought about making a video one day on how to deal with game addiction. It would be an in-depth personal video, but what I will say, if you're ever trying to get over a game addiction, you just need to find another addiction that's stronger than that previous addiction, right? I went from RuneScape to Destiny, and so you just keep one-upping the previous one, and then you're good. I know this is also very insensitive of me. My grandfather actually works in a rehab center as a therapist. He would be so disappointed right now in what I'm saying. Let's watch this video. Unshackled from Addiction, a Personal Destiny Retrospective.
Before I get into the subject matter of this video, I want to make something crystal clear. This is not a video condemning the state of Destiny 2. This is not a video bashing the immensely talented developers at Bungie. I really don't care about the meta of the game, the community sentiment, any of that. This video is not a Destiny 2 hate rant. If that's what you're looking for, you should look elsewhere. This video is about my own personal journey with this game, and how I've changed and grown as a person because of it. I'm mostly making this for myself, to help me unpack a lot of my feelings about it, and the impact it had on me, for better and worse. Although this is mostly a video for me, I hope at least some part of this resonates with you. This is a story about how I became hopelessly, damagingly addicted to Destiny, and what all came from it.
Classic, man. Classic.
Before we dive into the deep end, let's start with some context. My introduction to Bungie came from their final Halo entry, Halo Reach. When I was 12 years old, I remember wandering into a GameStop one day and spotting the game inconspicuously sitting on one of the lower shelves. I had heard of the series from a close childhood friend, but this was my first time seeing one of them for myself. While I had never played any shooters before, I mostly stuck to casual gaming as a kid, and I was really scared of violent games at the time, something about it just drew me in. So one of my parents reluctantly agreed to get it for me, despite the age ratings. My parents agreeing to get me the game ended up being one of the best things that happened to me. Halo Reach was an incredibly influential game that completely changed my relationship with the medium. The game was, and still is, incredible. The equally melancholic and bombastic campaign, the incredibly entertaining multiplayer, the surprisingly robust level editor in Forge, it was all amazing to my 12-year-old brain, and my 23-year-old one. But all that aside, Reach was simply a place of respite for me. I was a very introverted, socially anxious child. I had a lot of issues with body image and confidence, and I just felt really awful most days. I often ended up dissociating and distancing myself from my feelings just to feel okay at all. But being able to drop all those worries and come home to a game I loved, a community I found like-minded people in, was a huge comfort for me. I met so many wonderful people through matchmaking and custom games alike. Getting to talk with people all around the world and share that enjoyment of Reach with others was a hugely formative, positive experience. While I felt like a hopeless, lost teenager in school in my hometown, I felt like I had a home I could return to in Reach, where I could laugh at the absurd Forge creations people made, where I could share my deep anxieties and worries I didn't know how to share with others in person, where I felt like I could simply be myself. Needless to say, I care a lot about this game, and I sunk countless hours into it. While I wasn't tuned in with the greater gaming landscape, Halo Reach turned me into a proper Bungie fan. I knew for a fact I would pick up whatever they made next.
You know, it's so funny because, oh man, I remember when Reach came out, I rejected it, guys. I remember playing Halo 3 and I was like, there's no Master Chief. The hell with that game. I'm never going to play it. And I was hanging out with some friends. We were freshmen in college, and I remember going over to their house or their apartment, and they had Reach up, and they're like, dude, you got to see this. And they brought me out there, and I saw a Spartan armor lock and reject a hammer smashed to the face, and then proceeded to melee the person down. And dude, I was sold. At that moment, I was like, I need to play this. This is another level. This is another layer to Halo I've never experienced. And it was from that moment that I completely left 3. I loved Halo 3. I mean, I was completely devoted to 3. But it was at that moment that I left. Hammer or sword? Hammer, dude. Yeah, the hammer, the gravity hammer went to smash. My friend armor locked and it smashed, didn't kill him. And then when he came out, remember, it does the EMP blast, takes away the shield, he meleeed him. And armor lock was so busted at first too. It was so busted. But Reach was designed pretty much as like, it was the bones for what was going to be Destiny.
And that next ended up being Destiny. I found out about Destiny in a Game Informer magazine that we had shipped to my grandmother's house every month. At the time, I didn't have a smartphone or anything like that, so a big chunk of my gaming news was mostly from those magazines. The single screenshot that sold me on it was a first-person image of the Warlock, using a void melee attack in a dank, overgrown corridor, light spilling from a giant fan in the background. And that was all I needed. I remember very little else from the article at this point, but that single image completely hooked me. It sang to me in a way that no other game before had, and I knew then and there I would pick up the game as soon as it came out. And when the game did release a few months later, I giddily booted it up and breezed through the campaign in a few days. And then I stopped playing completely. I didn't get it. Was that all there really was to this?
Dude.
I think I was coming in with far different expectations than what they were promising in their marketing, but even looking at it from what they were trying to do, it was lackluster at best.
If you just came off of Halo Reach's campaign, or even any of the previous Halo games, and you played Destiny 1 vanilla, it was awful. It was awful. I mean, really. And look, that's a great example. We just literally talked about live service games versus single player experiences. And that was a great example of like the story just absolutely going to poop. Obviously, a lot of things came out. Remember, you had the whole ordeal with Marty O'Donnell. You had the narrative that got split up and cut up and everything was just janked. There's a lot of reasons why the story was bad, but none of them justifiable in my opinion. Internal woes that happen within your studio shouldn't be to blame because at the end of the day, you shipped that game. You shipped it as is. And D1 Vanilla's story, and even, you know, D2 Vanilla's story to some extent, but D1 Vanilla's story came out absolute garbage, fragmented, and for a diehard Halo fan, it made no sense to us. We were like, what the hell happened to the writers?
The campaign was incredibly dull, I disliked the PvP experience, and I had little interest in any of the endgame activities. In fact, I didn't even really understand the concept of an endgame at that point. I was never an MMO player or anything like that. Most of my game experience was with consoles like the Wii and Game Boy Advance, and my only PC gaming was with Minecraft. I was expecting a fantastic campaign with bombastic set pieces and emotional staying power like Reach, but what I got stood in stark contrast to that.
Yep.
So I just stopped playing and moved on. I didn't hate it. The gameplay was still super fun, but I came away from it rather disappointed. I pretty much just migrated back to Reach and other games and didn't think much of it for the next year or so. My rediscovery of Destiny was quite funny in retrospect. I remember seeing a trailer for The Taken King and thinking it was a brand new game in the series a mere 9 months after the base game. I didn't even understand the concept of a game expansion at that point. That's how divorced I was from MMOs. I had to have a high school friend tell me it wasn't a new game, but simply a big addition to it. I was kind of interested, but not really super pressed to pick it up. However, for some reason, I did start dabbling in the game again very close to the expansion's release, just a few short weeks before it was due to come out. And for some reason, things started clicking. I started playing the PvP regularly, even though I was still terrible. I did far more strikes and found them a lot more fun than I had remembered. While I still didn't touch any endgame stuff with a 10-foot pole, I was enjoying what I was trying a bit more. I still wasn't hugely invested, but I was enjoying myself. And when the expansion hit, so too did the beginning of my addictive, obsessive relationship with this franchise. The Taken King absorbed me. While the story was still nothing compared to my experiences with Reach, I still enjoyed it a lot. There were actually a few memorable missions that I replayed multiple times just to experience them all over again. That opening mission on Phobos still kicks ass. And around this time was when I started really delving into the endgame experience. I started occasionally doing raids. I tried and promptly gave up on Trials of Osiris. I did a handful of nightfalls, all that stuff. Now that I had a proper grasp of what the game was rather than what I was expecting it to be, I found myself sinking heavily into this world. I wouldn't say I was an incredibly active community member, but I still enjoyed it nonetheless. This relationship with the series continued on for a few years into Destiny 2 Vanilla. I enjoyed the game and played it very regularly, even though I wouldn't have considered myself a hardcore player back then. The claws of the game were already dug into me pretty deep, but when Forsaken rolled around, that's when they clamped down even harder. Before Forsaken,
Chad, what is this, Whisper
I can't
Mission?
say for certain whether
This is Whisper Mission or is this just Strike?
or not I was addicted to the franchise. I spent a lot of time with
Oh, I
it,
think
but
this is Strike.
I wouldn't say I had played it an unreasonable amount for a high schooler with nothing but time on their hands. But after Destiny 2's seminal expansion launched, I can say for certain that I was absolutely, without a doubt, addicted to this game. I was all in at this point. I had already been very invested in the game through the last year, despite all the issues with Destiny 2 at the time, but this just cemented my overwhelming obsession with this game.
That's surprising.
It was no longer just a place for me to hang out and unwind after work or classes. It was a lifestyle. It was around this time when I started engrossing myself in external media around Destiny. Lore videos, raid and nightfall guides, weapon reviews. If it was related to Destiny, I was probably watching or reading it. I wanted to know everything about the game. I kept up with all the weekly This Week at Bungie blogs, detailing balance changes, new content teases, and any other little morsels they shared. I fell head over heels for the game's marketing campaigns. Their flashy trailers for new seasons with incredible music and carefully curated gameplay moments always got me into an excited frenzy.
Dude, y'all remember when we used to get season do we still get season trailers? Do we still get season trailers? Or do they come afterwards, right? The trailer launches the day of. Okay. Back in the day, we used to get seasonal trailers like a week before. We would get a weapon preview trailer. So it would just be a trailer going over all the pinnacle weapons that were coming. That was awesome because you got to see everything. And I mean, you see it in action. It looked dope. You know, whether it was Luna's Howl, Not Forgotten, or Recluse, or even Mountaintop. And this got everybody hyped for it. The lead up was great, man. You know, I remember all the lead ups for Black Armory, Season of Opulence, Season of Dawn, Season of Rivals. I mean, that's stuff that generated hype.
I particularly remember the trailer for Season of the Dawn occupying my headspace for the entire week before it launched.
They call me the greatest who ever lived.
Destiny was no longer just a casual hobby. It began to eat away at everything around me. My brain was flooded with constant media and information surrounding the game, and I wanted nothing more than to immerse myself in the world and get away from everything else. I started neglecting classwork. I declined invitations to go out with friends to social gatherings. I began self-isolating, feverishly obsessing over the game. It went from a fun hobby on the side to my primary activity from day to day. I didn't really realize it at the time, but all this obsessive consumption of Destiny 2 related content was done as a way to escape my intense feelings of depression and anxiety, on top of a newfound uncertainty with my gender identity. After a particularly messy breakup in the late summer of 2019, and lingering feelings of low self-esteem for my teen years, I used the game as a means to shut those thoughts down. I began dissociating heavily, even more than I had used to, and just played the game mindlessly. I wanted anything to keep those awful, self-deprecating thoughts at bay. So, Destiny became that escape for me. But deep down, a part of me knew that trying to use video games to suppress all these thoughts wasn't a sustainable course of action. So despite all of my crippling anxiety about it, I began seeing a therapist to start unpacking a lot of my feelings about myself. And it was great. I started to get a better grasp of my emotions for the first time. I began to go out a bit more often and socialize with others at my college. I felt like I was making real connections with people, and things, for once, were finally starting to look up. I was still playing Destiny an obscene amount and still using it as an escape. That hadn't really changed, but it at least no longer felt like my only coping mechanism. But, of course, this was all soon before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Our college campus completely shut down. My newfound friends all had moved home to self-isolate, and my ability to see a therapist was thrown out the window. The entire world was seemingly thrown off balance, and things were more uncertain than they had ever been. This, on top of my growing questioning about my gender, and Destiny's less than stellar seasons during that year, all started snowballing in an all too familiar way. I needed some sort of outlet to keep myself from sinking back into those depressive holes I had found myself struggling to crawl out of before. So I turned my attention to animation and 3D art.
Attention, we will be arriving at our destination shortly.
This looks fucking good.
While skating back in time a bit, that's a Destiny joke, I absolutely loved making LEGO stop-motion animations as a kid. I still have my super old-ass YouTube channel with all the videos on it, and I cherish all of them. It was a huge creative outlet for me as a child. On top of that, I also made a few dozen Minecraft animated intros for people in Blender when I was 14 or 15, which was my first time ever really getting to grips with digital animation. So I already had a general familiarity with the medium. I was passionate about art and animation, and the forced isolation felt like a perfect time to start exploring it again. And as soon as I found out that Destiny 2 had an entire model ripping community with custom-made rigs and maps to use in Blender, I was all in. I wanted to create art and animations in the same world I'd become completely engrossed in. However, some of that drive wasn't coming from a place of love. I was pretty discontent with the way Bungie had been handling the story of Destiny 2 for the last year or so. Shadowkeep was disappointing, both in terms of length and the actual quality of content within that length. And while, as mentioned before, I was super hyped for Season of the Dawn, I still wasn't in love with it. And Season of the Worthy was an absolute mess that frustrated me to no end. I still felt like I loved the game, but the ways in which the story were delivered definitely contributed to my drive to animate and make art. I wanted to take this underdeveloped, undercooked story and make something wonderful with it myself. In retrospect, this was an incredibly lofty goal, one which I never really achieved, but regardless of that, the game had given me an outlet to express myself, something that was very sorely needed given the current circumstances. Getting back into making art started pretty small, with little personal pieces made for friends and myself, but over the next few months, it began to become a much more serious endeavor as I gained traction on social media. I remember the first ever post I made that exploded on Twitter incredibly vividly. It was a really quick and lazy Mixamo motion capture video of the Insurrection Prime raid boss dancing to Tame Impala's The Less I Know the Better. It was literally just screen recorded, and for some reason, it went crazy viral in the community. It received over 5,000 likes and got me my first ever surge of followers. That absolute euphoric hit of dopamine from having that much attention on something I did was such a surreal feeling. While that post had no real effort behind it, the attention put on me managed to inspire me to start taking art way more seriously. Getting back into art around this time felt like a perfect storm. I found a new way to love Destiny 2, separate from playing it, and in the process, I got to meet a ton of amazing new people. I started gaining a substantial social media following, I opened up commissions for the first time, and after losing a shitty retail job in mid-2021, I went full-time on them. This is when my relationship with Destiny shifted into something completely different. Instead of simply being a fan of the game, I became a community artist and animator. I started gaining more and more traction on social media. My commissions ramped up, and I spent most of my time either working on Destiny-related art or playing the game. Things were going great for me, and despite my qualms with the game itself, I was finding myself diving deeper and deeper into the Destiny rabbit hole.
I would love some thumbnails from Autumn here, because these are really good. Like, really good. Like, some of these set pieces are fantastic. And we actually do look for animators, so yeah.
Despite my qualms with the game itself, I was finding myself diving deeper and deeper into the Destiny rabbit hole. In retrospect, this period of time with the franchise for me is the one I find myself the most conflicted about. Even though lots of good came from my time being invested in Destiny and its community, I also feel like its absolute stranglehold on me came at such a high cost. The people I met through the game are some of my most cherished friends. Hell, I even bonded with my girlfriend through Destiny before we started dating. I discovered amazing artists, got to talk to and make art for developers of the game, met people who helped guide me towards my eventual transition, ran a charity livestream to raise money for the Trevor Project, and so much more. I genuinely have a lot of fond memories surrounding this franchise, ones I wouldn't trade for the world. But even with all the great things that happened, I also find myself looking back with a lot of resentment and regret. It feels like I spent so much of my life with tunnel vision, absorbing all things Destiny while neglecting other parts of my life. With the way the game is designed, it just eats away at everything else around you, working tirelessly to keep you in its grasp. It doesn't want you to leave. And for the longest time, I didn't know how badly I wanted to get away from it. This is something I've sat on for the last year now, being divorced from the game's iron grip. Destiny, like several other live service games, want you to stay so you'll spend money. It uses a weekly reset cadence to keep you coming back and to build in a habit of play. It uses limited time events with exclusive cosmetics and rewards that incentivize continued engagement. It uses almost every trick in the book to keep you coming back, day after day, week after week, year after year. This isn't to say that this is a totally negative way to approach a game's updates. It can be really sweet to be a part of a constantly growing, evolving experience. But in my experience, this model is what perpetuated my addiction to the series. The tricks they used worked on me. I was hooked. I would always return for the weekly resets, farm raids and nightfalls, and feverishly grind out their regular seasonal events. And with how invested I was in the game, it wasn't a huge leap for me to become a community member and artist, and to let the game leak into other aspects of my life. When I said before that Destiny was a lifestyle, this is what I meant. Relaxation, making artwork, communities I hung out with, they all revolved around the game. It was like a worm that wriggled into my brain to invade all my waking thoughts with nothing but Destiny. I think I sort of knew this was the case for a while before I broke my addiction with this series, but I never really explored those feelings in the way I am now. And Lightfall was what prompted the shattering of that addiction, and the start of my confused, messy reflection on this whole series. Once again, I would like to reiterate that this video is not an attack of the incredibly talented, likely heavily crunching staff that worked on Lightfall. Even though I know I made the joke a second ago, if you want to break addiction to a game, then just get addicted to another game. But nothing breaks an addiction to a game more than a crappy expansion or experience. I was head over heels in love with RuneScape. It was my life, but Evolution of Combat broke me. And that actually, I quit RuneScape after that. And that is why nailing the expansions is so important, because you will literally lose people. And look, everything aside about, you know, letting life implode and balance, you know, life balance and all that shit, that's important. It really is, you know, having a balanced life, whatever the f that even means. But having a balanced life, whatever that means for you. But nothing ruins the hamster wheel of that addiction more than a shitty expansion. Several major gripes with this expansion that are relevant to my story here. That's not what this video is about. If you were one of the people who harassed the developers at Bungie for Lightfall, oh, fuck you. Anyways, when Lightfall released, I was just completely baffled at the clearly rushed experience that had been sold to me for $100. The story was incredibly benign, the mission design was a substantial step down for me, and the amount of additional content was paltry at best. I thought the single news strike was incredibly bland, and the raid was a pitifully easy brain-dead experience to run through. After years of goodwill and trust that had been meticulously built by Bungie, it felt like all of that was ripped away to fill a delay with a hasty slapped-together expansion. The poor quality of it all stood in very stark contrast to the stellar Witch Queen. I was completely taken aback at the huge mess Lightfall ended up being. And all that was enough for me to take a step back and start interrogating all these bubbling feelings that had been festering for the last few years. Before this point, I was still enjoying the game enough to keep my messy, confused feelings at bay. I pushed them aside, thinking, well, Bungie's doing great right now. I'll keep playing because I'm excited to see what they do next. I adored the narrative leaps taken in The Witch Queen. The raid was one of the most memorable video game experiences I've ever had, especially the crazy intense day one run my team and I fought through.
Come on. Never mind.
Oh my god. Let's go! The art design of the throne world is genuinely one of the most jaw-dropping spectacles in any video game I've ever played. Despite my issues and feelings in the background, there was just enough for me to latch onto to keep me going. But with Lightfall, there was no such things to grasp at anymore. The veil had been pulled from my eyes. Even though I was reluctant to come to terms with it at first, I could finally see my experience with this franchise for what it was. A terrible, crippling, one-way addiction that previously had no end in sight. My entire life orbited around this game. I neglected social gatherings. I pushed aside my own physical health. I let myself get comfortable in the repetitive, addicting, fear of missing out cycle of the game, always logging on and losing hours to it mindlessly. I used it to dissociate and distance myself from my own emotions, making every waking hour feel hollow and meaningless. The only meaning I felt like I had most of the time was being a Destiny artist and fan. That's all I felt I was. All my life was, and revolved around, was Destiny. What started as a distant, lukewarm relationship with a series I barely even understood eventually snowballed into an out-of-control addiction that I didn't know how to escape from. But with Lightfall abruptly grabbing the veil over my eyes and ripping it off, I finally felt like I could see a way out, that my life could be more than just Destiny.
As a game developer, that's the worst thing you want to hear. If I was ever to make a video game, I would want it to be so addicting, so fucking mesmerizing, so addicting that no one would be able to escape. It's if I was to ever make a game. I wanted to grab everybody by the balls. Well, don't make a shitty expansion. You're exactly right. What he's saying right now is exactly what everyone experienced. And I mean, for someone like Bungie, this is terrible. This is awful. Remnant 2 did that for me. Yeah. I know. Some games do it right, but he's right. The veil, whenever you have a shit experience or shit expansion, the veil gets pulled back and suddenly you start saying crazy things. Like, I think I'm going to go do IRL shit, you know? I think I'm going to go have a balanced life now. I think I'm going to make real friends. As a game developer, these are things you do not want to hear. That's the worst thing. The worst fucking things you can hear. So yeah, Final Shape is going to have to really pop to pull that veil back over.
It has been messy, but trying to reckon with years worth of thoughts and experiences is, unsurprisingly, a very messy endeavor. I had been so tied up in this franchise that trying to untangle it,
I don't know why the video is so blurred. I think he accidentally put blurred on the rest of this.
It all was, and frankly still is, incredibly daunting. When I finally understood that I was addicted and that I wanted to escape, it wasn't a cold turkey experience. I still played fairly regularly, albeit far less than before. I still found myself mindlessly opening the game, attempting to lose myself in the world. But those thoughts couldn't just be packed back up now. Every single time I loaded Destiny up post-Lightfall, those unpacked, scattered thoughts kept bouncing around my mind. Why am I playing this? What is the point of logging on right now? What else could I be doing instead of this?
Those are the worst things you should... Okay, no, honestly, he's bringing up valid things that he's saying. But I'm just saying, from a game developer's perspective, this is the... One day, we're going to have to make like a psychology book for gaming. I mean, I don't know how to create a game, but I do know how to get my balls fondled just right to keep me pulled in forever and ever. And I also know how that grip gets loosened. And it has been loosened twice in my life. And it's because of the developers. The developers have loosened their grips. And I feel like we could make a video on this. You know what I mean? Just how to grab onto it and just hang on to it.
The newfound context of my addiction framed the experience in an entirely new light. I no longer found myself enjoying the game. The grind for god rolls and armor felt pointless. Finishing the season passes felt like a chore. I haven't finished them in a few seasons. I backed away heavily from creating art of the game, and I halted accepting commissions entirely. As these feelings amplified, so too did my distance from Destiny. And with this growing distance came more opportunity to start exploring other things in my life. I began exercising regularly again for the first time in years and started paying far more attention to my physical health. I picked up cooking. I began seeing a therapist again. I started exploring other art mediums. I found tons of new games to try, and I even got back into reading and visiting the local library. With all the extra time being divorced from Destiny provided, I've been able to start focusing on myself in a far healthier way and reassess my relationship with it and games like it. I think in retrospect, my intense hyperfixation on this series has caused me to view the idea of a live service game in a completely new light. The amount of hours I sunk into Destiny feels embarrassing to me now. Thousands of hours poured into a single game when I could have taken that time to explore so many other things in my life. Service-style games are inherently manipulative with your time, using fear of missing out tactics to keep you coming back, even if you don't really want to. It builds a pattern of habit over time, and seeing how ingrained I was in that is hard to stomach now. Coming to terms with all the wasted time has been painful. I no longer enjoy live service games in the way I once did. I worry that my addictive, obsessive tendencies with them will send me hurtling towards another unhealthy cycle yet again. I don't want that for myself anymore. I want to enjoy games and other parts of my life in a less destructive way. No longer do I want to use games as an escape for my feelings, to let the world around me fade into the background, to make excuses for my poor mental and physical health. I want to experience all that games have to offer. I want to tackle my mental health head on and not use games as an excuse to hide from them anymore. I don't want to let myself become tunnel visioned down a single ruinous path again. I love the people that work at Bungie still. I still love the friends and memories I made with my time in its many communities. I love that I found a passion for art again and am actively pursuing a career in it. I love that I met my girlfriend through this game and all my time in it, but I no longer love Destiny. If you watched the entire way through, I hope some part of this video has resonated with you. If you're dealing with an addiction, be that to a game or anything else, just know you aren't alone and that you can get out. Feel free to share your own stories if you have any. Thank you very much for listening.
All right. Well, I would say there's trade-offs with everything in life, whatever that may be, whatever is consuming your time. That could be anything from video games to hanging out with friends. You could argue and say, hey, I hung out with my friends too much and wasted too much of my time. Or just even relationships. I committed too much time to this one individual in my life. Personally, I think that, at least from what I've seen, most Destiny players do have a balanced life. More so than I've seen from other games. I think everybody's probably had a gaming addiction at some point, whatever game that may be. But we've got a lot of people that come by that literally carry on normal, productive lives, but also game. I think you could 1000% do both. I've got a friend who's a surgeon, and he fucking literally will be in an operating room and would do surgery and be like in the background will have his RuneScape character mining coal. So you can balance the two. But I would say that if you have an addictive personality, then, you know, maybe you should be more conscious of how much time you commit to something. I would say I have an addictive personality too. You definitely can be balanced, but when shit hits the fan in life, it gets hard. Yeah, you know, the part where he talked about, you know, using gaming as an escape. I mean, dude, that can happen with a lot of things. You know, you can use sex as an escape. You can use drugs as an escape, right? I mean, there's so many things you can use as an escape that you can look back on and say, wow, what a big waste of time. You know, I think we've all done it. And I think that's just part of growing. I especially believe it's good to have had that experience, because at least you're looking back and you're assessing where you were and where you want to go. So, but sex and drugs are cooler than video games, low key? No, I don't think that. You know, what if you knock up the wrong girl during your escape? You know what I mean? I mean, dude, thank God I got so lucky. I mean, I had an angel watching over me for sure. That and birth control. I mean, and And thank God I didn't have a kid in my teens in 20, or I did have a kid later on, like in 24, 25. But you know, I mean, thank God. It would have been awful. It would have been terrible. I think there's also a point in our life where our brains are just not fully developed, and so like things just hit differently. You know what I mean? And you just, it's like, you know, especially like in your later teen years and then like 20, 21, 20, I mean, things just hit differently. Everything just feels too fucking good, man. Too fucking good. I would say about 24. 24 for me was when I was like, okay, I think I'm able to get past some of this stuff. Gaming addiction, with any addiction, I'm probably not the best person to be approaching about this stuff because, you know, maybe there's some eternal, deep-rooted problems, whatever they may be. But I would just suggest, if you feel regretful about something, then you probably should steer away from that. And I do carry the belief of try to find fulfillment in the little things and the small things and the small tasks. Dude, I go and clean my garage. I feel pretty fucking good. I'm like, hell yeah. I just clean the garage. I go take the garbage out. I'm like, hey, y'all see that? Took the garbage out. But this whole video just got super deep, man. I thought it was going to be, I mean, it was about Destiny and Unshackled from Addiction and a person. I mean, everything is, it's not like anything was misleading here. But I think the big takeaways is nothing breaks an addiction more than a game going to shit, right? And that's exactly what happened in Lightfall. Best Destiny killer is Destiny itself. That is so true. The best Destiny killer is Destiny itself.
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.